Hi everyone. Tonight we're stepping into the shadowed halls of Elizabethan England, where the air hums with tension, and a single word from the Queen could spark fear or favor. Picture yourself in a candlelit chamber, the scent of wax mingling with the damp chill of stone walls, as whispers of Elizabeth I's temper ripple through the court. You probably won't survive this unscathed if you're a courtier navigating her moods. Her fury could burn brighter than the sun or vanish like mist, leaving you to guess her next move. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'd love to know where you're joining us from. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan to some soothing background music. And let's get started tonight. You're standing in the Privy Chamber of Whitehall Palace in 1587, the air thick with the scent of polished oak and nervous sweat. The flickering torchlight casts long shadows across the faces of Elizabeth I's privy councillors, their velvet robes stiff with embroidery, their eyes darting toward the Queen. She sits at the head of the table, her red gold hair catching the light, her fingers drumming an impatient rhythm on the armrest of her chair. Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, is not in a forgiving mood today. Her temper, a force as unpredictable as a Thames storm, is about to erupt, and you, a minor scribe tucked in the corner, can feel the weight of it building. The room is debating the fate of the Spanish envoy, Don Bernardino de Mendoza, who has been caught meddling in plots against the Queen. His letters, intercepted by Sir Francis Walsingham's spies, hint at support for Catholic conspiracies, perhaps even the assassination of Elizabeth herself. The councillors, a mix of seasoned statesmen like William Cecil, Lord Burghley, and younger firebrands like Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, are divided. Some urge caution. Expelling Mendoza risks war with Spain, a nation whose Armada looms like a shadow over England's shores. Others, emboldened by Protestant zeal, demand his head. You scribble their words, your quill scratching against parchment, knowing that one wrong move could draw the Queen's ire toward you. Elizabeth's temper was no mere royal quirk. It was a tool, a weapon, and a liability. Born in 1533 to Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, she inherited her father's fiery disposition, but tempered it with her mother's cunning. By 1587, she was 54, her reign a delicate balance of power, charisma, and fear. Her outbursts were legendary. Courtiers spoke in hushed tones of thrown goblets, shattered mirrors, and rages that left grown men trembling. Yet her temper was not mindless. It was a calculated performance, often staged to bend her counsel to her will or to keep foreign ambassadors guessing. But in this moment, as the debate over Mendoza drags on, you sense something different. Her silence is too heavy, her gaze too sharp. The room feels like a tinderbox. The historical record confirms Elizabeth's volatility. Letters from her counselors describe her sharp words and sudden passions, particularly in moments of political strain. In 1587, England was a Protestant island in a sea of Catholic powers, with Spain's Philip II openly plotting to overthrow her. The execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, earlier that year had inflamed tensions, making every decision a potential spark for war. Mendoza, a seasoned diplomat with a knack for intrigue, was a thorn in Elizabeth's side. His expulsion in 1584 for earlier plots had not deterred him. Now, back in England under diplomatic pretense, he was suspected of funneling gold to Catholic rebels. The stakes could not be higher. You watch as Burghley, his face lined with decades of service, argues for diplomacy. Your Majesty, to act rashly against Mendoza is to invite Philip's wrath, he says, his voice steady but cautious. We cannot afford war without allies. Leicester, ever the hawk, counters sharply. The Spaniard mocks us, Your Majesty. His presence is an insult to your crown. The Queen's fingers pause, her eyes narrowing. You hold your breath, knowing her next words could shift the course of history. Her temper, when unleashed, often forced decisions that her cautious advisors might otherwise delay. But what drives this rage? Is it fear of betrayal, anger at Spain's audacity, or something deeper, perhaps the weight of a crown she never chose? The counselors' voices rise, each trying to sway her. You notice the smallest details, the way Burghley's hands tremble slightly as he gestures, the sweat beating on Leicester's brow despite the chilly room. Elizabeth's temper was shaped by her precarious youth, imprisoned in the Tower, declared a bastard. Surrounded by plots, she learned early that fear could be a weapon, and her outbursts were often as strategic as they were emotional. Yet, as you stand there, quill in hand, you wonder if this time her anger is genuine. The Spanish threat is real, and Mendoza's actions strike at the heart of her sovereignty. The debate stretches into the evening, the candles burning low. Elizabeth finally speaks, her voice low but cutting. You think me weak, my lords? You think I will suffer a Spaniard to plot my death in my own court? The room falls silent, and you feel the weight of her words. She rises, her gown rustling, and paces toward the window, staring out at the darkened Thames. Mendoza will answer, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. But not today. She turns, her eyes blazing, and you know the matter is far from settled. The counselors exchange glances, unsure whether to press further or retreat. You, the scribe, are invisible to them, but you feel the tension like a noose. Your role is to record, not to act. Yet you know that Elizabeth's temper will dictate what happens next. Will she expel Mendoza, risking war, or will she play a subtler game, using her rage to mask a deeper strategy? The answer lies in her next move. But for now, the chamber holds its breath, waiting for the storm to break. What will Elizabeth's temper unleash upon her court and upon England when she makes her decision? You're back in Whitehall Palace. 1587, the Privy Chamber still heavy with the aftermath of Elizabeth I's sharp words. The torches have been relit, casting a warm glow over the same oak table, but the air feels tighter now, as if the walls themselves are bracing for the Queen's next move. You, the scribe, stand in your corner, quill poised, your fingers cramped from hours of writing. The debate over Don Bernardino de Mendoza, the Spanish envoy, has not ended, it's only grown more tangled. Elizabeth's temper, barely restrained in the last council meeting, now simmers beneath her composed exterior, and you can sense it in the way her eyes flicker over her counselors. Her rage is a living thing, coiled and ready to strike, and you're caught in its shadow, recording every word for posterity. Since that tense evening, days have passed, and the Privy Council has reconvened. The question of Mendoza remains unresolved, his presence in London a festering wound. Elizabeth's advisors are walking a knife's edge, pushed too hard, her temper could erupt, hesitate, and they risk appearing weak. You've heard whispers in the corridors, servants and minor courtiers murmuring about the Queen's moods. One maid swears she saw Elizabeth hurl a silver candlestick at a page for spilling ink. Another claims she wept after a private meeting with Walsingham. These stories, though likely exaggerated, paint a picture of a queen whose emotions are as much a battlefield as the political landscape she navigates. The historical record supports this. Elizabeth's temper was not just a personal trait, but a political instrument. Letters from her secretary, Sir Francis Walsingham, describe her as changeable in her humors, capable of shifting from icy calm to blistering fury in moments. In 1587, with Spain's threat growing, her outbursts were often tied to moments of crisis. The execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, had sent shockwaves through Europe, and Philip II's Armada was no longer a rumor, but a gathering storm. Mendoza, a cunning diplomat, was suspected of funneling money to Catholic plotters, perhaps even coordinating with Jesuit priests hiding in England's shadows. His actions challenged Elizabeth's authority, and her temper, you realize, is as much about survival as it is about pride. Today, the council chamber is quieter, the councillors more cautious. William Cecil, Lord Burghley, sits with a stack of papers, his face etched with worry. He spent decades managing Elizabeth's moods, and you notice how he chooses his words with care, like a man stepping through a field of thorns. Your Majesty, he begins. Mendoza's letters suggest he's in contact with Catholic exiles in Paris. We must act, but expulsion now could provoke Spain before our navy is ready. Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, leans forward, his voice bolder. He mocks your crown. Madam, send him back to Philip in chains, and let Spain know we fear no one. You scribble their words, your quill scratching louder in the tense silence. Elizabeth listens, her fingers tracing the edge of a gold-embossed prayer book. You've seen her do this before, a small gesture that belies the storm within. Her temper, you've learned, is not just about anger, it's about control. She uses it to keep her counselors off balance, to remind them that she, not they, holds England's fate. But today, you sense something deeper, the weight of ruling a divided nation, surrounded by enemies, has worn her down, her youth marked by imprisonment, betrayal, and the ever-present threat of assassination has taught her to wield fear as a shield. Yet, as you watch her, you wonder if her temper is also a crack in that shield, a glimpse of the woman beneath the crown. The counselors continue, each trying to steer her decision. Walsingham, the spy master, produces a decoded letter from Mendoza, its contents damning, promises of Spanish gold to Catholic rebels in the north. He is a viper in our midst, Walsingham says, his voice cold. Elizabeth's eyes narrow, and you brace yourself. A viper, she repeats, her voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. And what am I, sir, if I let this viper slither through my court? The room freezes. Burghley clears his throat, but before he can speak, Elizabeth rises, her gown sweeping the floor. You all counsel me to wait, to plot, to play the diplomat, but I am no pawn to be moved by Spain's hand. Her voice rises, and you feel the room shrink under her fury. She paces, her steps quick and deliberate, her hands clenched. Mendoza thinks me weak. Does he? He thinks England a prize to be plucked. She stops, turning to face her counselors, her face pale but her eyes blazing. I will have his answer, and I will have it now. You write furiously, your hand shaking, knowing this moment could tip England toward war or peace. Her temper is no longer just a performance, it's a force driving her toward a decision that could reshape Europe. But then, something shifts. Elizabeth pauses, her gaze falling on you, the scribe. For a fleeting moment, you freeze, your quill hovering. Does she see you, or is she lost in her thoughts? She turns away, her voice softening. Bring Mendoza to me, she says, almost to herself. Let him face his queen. The counselors exchange glances, unsure whether this is a victory or a trap. You note the order, your heart pounding. To summon Mendoza is to escalate the crisis, to force a confrontation that could end in his expulsion or worse. But Elizabeth's temper, you realize, is not just about rage, it's about timing. She's playing a game only she understands, using her anger to mask her strategy. As the council disperses, you linger, your parchment filled with the day's events. The servants bustle in, replacing candles, their whispers speculating on what Mendoza's audience with the Queen will bring. You've heard tales of Elizabeth's private meetings, how she could charm or terrify with a single glance. Mendoza, a seasoned diplomat, is no stranger to royal tempers, but Elizabeth's is unlike any other. Will her anger force a reckless decision, or is she weaving a subtler plan, using her temper to outmaneuver her enemies? The palace grows quiet, the Thames outside, reflecting the moon's pale light. You pack your quill and ink, your mind racing. Elizabeth's temper has set the stage for a confrontation that could change England's course. But what will happen when Mendoza stands before her and her fury meets his defiance? You're standing in the Great Hall of Whitehall Palace, 1587, the air thick with anticipation and the faint scent of beeswax from freshly polished floors. The hall is grander than the Privy Chamber, its high ceilings adorned with intricate tapestries depicting England's triumphs. You, the scribe, clutch your parchment and quill, your presence barely noticed among the courtiers gathered like moths around a flame. At the center of it all is Elizabeth I, seated on a raised throne, her crimson gown a stark contrast to the pale face that betrays her barely contained fury. Today, Don Bernardino de Mendoza, the Spanish envoy, will face her, and you know her temper unleashed in the council chamber days ago has built to a crescendo that could alter England's fate. The hall is crowded but silent, the courtiers' whispers hushed as Mendoza enters, his dark doublet and stiff ruff marking him as a foreigner in this Protestant court. His steps are measured, his expression calm, but you notice the slight tightening of his jaw. He's no stranger to royal audiences, having served Philip II in courts across Europe. But Elizabeth's temper is a force even he cannot predict. You've recorded the council's debates, the Queen's sharp words, and the mounting evidence of Mendoza's treachery letters linking him to Catholic plots, gold smuggled to rebels, and whispers of assassination. Now, as he bows before her, you sense the weight of this moment. Elizabeth's temper, so often a calculated tool, feels raw today, and you wonder if it will push her to a decision that could ignite war. Elizabeth's reign, as you've seen through your quill's scratches, was a delicate dance of power and survival, By 1587, she was 54, her body weakened by years of stress, but her mind as sharp as ever. Her temper, inherited from Henry VIII, was both her strength and her vulnerability. Historical accounts, like those of her secretary, William Davison, describe her rages as thunderbolts that could silence a room or force a policy shift. Yet, they also note her ability to rein in her anger, turning it into a performance that kept her enemies off balance. The Spanish threat loomed large. Mendoza's actions were not just personal affronts, but challenges to England's sovereignty. With the Armada's shadow growing, every decision carried the weight of war or peace. Elizabeth speaks, her voice clear and cold, cutting through the hall like a blade. "Senor Mendoza," she begins, "you come to my court under the guise of peace. Yet your hand stirs discord. You scribble her words, your hand steady despite the tension." Mendoza's eyes meet hers, unflinching. "Your Majesty," he replies, his accent clipped. "I serve my king as you serve your realm. I seek only friendship between our nations." The lie hangs in the air, and you see Elizabeth's fingers tighten on the arms of her throne. The courtiers shift, sensing the storm. You recall the intercepted letters, the proof of Mendoza's dealings with Catholic exiles, and you know he's gambling with his life. Her temper flares. Friendship. She snaps, rising from her throne. "You weave plots against my crown, sir, and think me blind." Her voice rises, echoing off the stone walls, and you feel the room shrink. Courtiers lower their eyes, some stepping back as if her anger might burn them. You've heard tales of her outbursts, how she once struck a maid for a crooked bow, how she banished a favorite for a careless jest. But this is different. This is a queen defending her realm, her temper aflame, fed by years of betrayal and fear. "Your letters betray you," she continues, "and your king's gold buys knives for my throat." Mendoza's composure falters, a flicker of unease crossing his face. You glance at William Cecil, Lord Burghley, standing nearby, his expression unreadable. He's spent decades navigating Elizabeth's moods, and you wonder if he fears her temper will push her too far. Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, stands opposite, his eyes gleaming with approval. The council's divide caution versus confrontation plays out in their faces, but Elizabeth holds the reins. She steps forward, her gown rustling, and you note the deliberate slowness of her movements, a contrast to her fiery words. Is her temper driving her, or is she wielding it to force Mendoza's hand? The historical record offers clues. In 1587, Elizabeth expelled Mendoza for his role in Catholic plots, a decision that escalated tensions with Spain but stopped short of war. Letters from the time, preserved in the state papers, show her counselors urging restraint, fearing Philip II's retaliation. Yet Elizabeth's temper, as much as her strategy, shaped the outcome. She used her rage to project strength, to show Spain she would not bow. But you, standing in this hall, see the human cost, the courtiers' fear, Mendoza's defiance, and Elizabeth's own strain, a woman carrying a nation's weight on her shoulders. "Mendoza," she says, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "you will leave my court and my kingdom by week's end. Tell your king that England's queen does not suffer traitors." The hall exhales. The decision made, Mendoza bows, his face a mask, and exits without a word. You write the verdict. your quill trembling slightly. Expulsion, not execution, a calculated move, but one that risks war. The courtiers murmur, some relieved, others anxious. You catch Burgley's eye, and he nods faintly, as if acknowledging the balance Elizabeth has struck. As the hall empties, you linger, your parchment heavy with the day's events. Elizabeth's temper, you realize, was both her weapon and her shield. It forced Mendoza's expulsion, signaling England's resolve, but it also preserved peace, if only for a moment. The Armada would come the next year, 1588, and Elizabeth's temper would again shape her response, rallying her people with fiery speeches. But for now, the crisis is averted, and you, the scribe, are left to ponder the woman behind the crown. Her anger was real, born of a life under threat, but it was also her greatest performance, bending her court and her enemies to her will. Reflecting on this moment, you see how Elizabeth's temper shaped history. Her outburst against Mendoza was not just a personal flare-up, but a turning point, a signal to Spain that England would not yield. It set the stage for the Armada's defeat, a victory that defined her reign. Today, we might see her temper as a flaw, but in 1587, it was a force that held a nation together. It reminds you that history's great moments often hinge on human emotions, raw, messy, and powerful. How might our own tempers, unchecked or wielded, shape the world we leave behind? You're crouched over a small wooden desk in a dimly lit corner of Richmond Palace. 1585, the scratch of your quill, the only sound breaking the silence of the early morning. The air smells of damp stone and old parchment, and your fingers ache from hours of copying letters for Elizabeth I's court. You're a scribe, one of many faceless servants in the Queen's vast machine, tasked with recording her words, her decrees, and the endless debates of her Privy Council. But today, your heart pounds with a fear that no ink can capture. You've heard the stories Elizabeth's temper, a storm that can erupt without warning, leaving even the mightiest courtiers trembling. And yesterday, you made a mistake, one that could draw her wrath upon you. Your name is Thomas Weaver, a minor clerk trained in the art of calligraphy. Your life, a quiet rhythm of ink and parchment. You've served in the royal household for 3 years, your days spent transcribing proclamations or copying diplomatic letters for men like Sir Francis Walsingham. The work is tedious, the hours long, but it's safe, or so you thought. Yesterday, in a rush to complete a draft of a letter to the French ambassador, you miswrote a phrase, addressing the ambassador as His Excellency instead of His Grace, a small error, easily corrected. But the letter reached Elizabeth's desk before anyone noticed. Now, you've been summoned to the Privy Chamber, and the weight of her temper looms over you like a gathering storm. Elizabeth I's temper was no secret in 1585. At 52, she was a queen, hardened by decades of threats, plots from Catholics, pressure from Spain, and the endless scheming of her own court. Her outbursts were legendary, recorded in letters and diaries of those who served her. A courtier named John Harrington once wrote of her sharp tongue that could flay a man alive, recalling how she berated a servant for a minor lapse until he wept. Her temper was both a weapon and a shield, used to assert control over a fractious court and a nation teetering on the edge of crisis. In 1585, England faced mounting tensions with Spain, and in every diplomatic letter was a thread in a delicate web. Your mistake, though small, could be seen as a slight to France, a key ally against Spanish aggression. You rise from your desk, your hands trembling as you gather your tools, quill, inkpot, and a fresh sheet of parchment. The summons came at dawn, delivered by a stern-faced page who offered no details. As you walk through the palace's winding corridors, the tapestries depicting England's victories seem to mock your anxiety. You pass servants polishing silver, their whispers trailing you like shadows. The Queen's in a foul mood. One mutters, "She threw a book at Lord Howard yesterday." You swallow hard, your mind racing. Elizabeth's temper was not just about anger, it was about power. A single misstep could end your career or worse, land you in the Tower. The historical record paints a vivid picture of Elizabeth's court in 1585. The Treaty of Nonsuch, signed that year, pledged English support to the Dutch against Spain, a move that escalated tensions with Philip II. Every letter, every word, was scrutinized, as alliances could shift with a single miscalculation. Scribes like you were invisible, but essential, your work shaping the diplomatic face of England. Yet invisibility offered no protection when the Queen's temper flared. A 1585 letter from Walsingham to William Cecil, Lord Burghley, mentions a scribe dismissed for a careless error in a dispatch, his name erased from court records. You wonder if that will be your fate. You reach the privy chamber, its heavy oak door guarded by 2 yeomen. They nod you through, and you step into a room bathed in pale morning light. Elizabeth sits at a table, her red gold hair catching the sun, her fingers tapping a restless rhythm. Burghley stands nearby, his face a mask of patience, while Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, lounges against a wall, his eyes sharp. You bow low, your heart hammering. The letter you miscopied lies on the table, its wax seal broken. Elizabeth's gaze fixes on you, and you feel the weight of her scrutiny, as if she can see every mistake you've ever made. "Mistress Weaver," she says, her voice deceptively calm. The use of mistress stings a deliberate slight, as if your status is too low for proper address. Do you know the cost of your error? You open your mouth, but no words come. The room feels smaller, the air thinner. "France is our shield against Spain," she continues, her tone sharpening. "And you, with your careless quill, would make us look the fool." Her voice rises, and you flinch, expecting a storm. Burghley clears his throat, perhaps to intervene, but Elizabeth's glare silences him. You're alone, a scribe caught in the Queen's crosshairs. You stammer an apology, your voice barely audible. "Your Majesty, I meant no offense. It was a slip, a moment's lapse." She leans forward, her eyes narrowing. "A slip," she repeats, her voice a blade. "A slip could cost us an ally, a war, a kingdom." You feel the room's eyes on you, the courtiers watching like hawks. Elizabeth's temper, you realize, is not just about your mistake. It's about the pressure of her crown, the endless threats she faces. Your error is a spark in a powder keg, and her anger is the flame. She rises, pacing, her gown rustling like a warning. You think your work is small, scribe. You think your quill does not shape my realm. You bow your head, praying for mercy. The historical record shows Elizabeth's temper could be fleeting. She once forgave a page who spilled wine on her gown, laughing it off hours later. But in matters of state, her forgiveness was rare. You wonder if she'll banish you, or if her temper will demand a harsher price. As she pauses by a window, staring out at the frost-covered gardens, the room holds its breath. You clutch your quill, its feather trembling. Will her anger consume you, or is there a chance for redemption? What will Elizabeth's temper demand of a humble scribe? Caught in her storm, you're still in Richmond Palace, 1585, standing in the privy chamber where the air feels like it's holding its breath alongside you. The morning light has shifted, casting long shadows across the oak-paneled walls, and Elizabeth I's piercing gaze lingers on you. Thomas Weaver, a lowly scribe whose mistake in a diplomatic letter has drawn her ire. Your quill, still clutched in your trembling hand, feels like a traitor, its ink the source of your peril. The Queen's temper, a force you've only heard whispered about until now, is no longer a rumor. It's a storm you're caught in, and you're not sure if you'll emerge unscathed. Her words, sharp as a blade, echo in your mind. A slip could cost us an ally, a war, a kingdom. You stand frozen, waiting for her verdict, knowing that her temper could rewrite your fate. Elizabeth paces slowly, her crimson gown trailing like a warning. The privy chamber is quieter now, the courtiers' murmurs hushed, as if they fear drawing her attention. William Cecil, Lord Burghley, stands with his hands clasped, his eyes flickering between you and the Queen. Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, watches with a faint smirk, as if your predicament is a minor amusement. You're a nobody in this room of power, your role to record their words, not to shape them, yet your error, a single misphrased title in a letter to the French ambassador, has made you the center of Elizabeth's wrath. The weight of her crown, her fears of Spanish plots and French betrayal, rests on your mistake. The historical context of 1585 sharpens the stakes. England was a Protestant island in a Catholic sea, with Spain's Philip II plotting and France wavering as an ally. The Treaty of Nonsuch, signed earlier that year, committed England to support the Dutch against Spain, a move that strained relations with both powers. Diplomatic letters, like the one you botched, were not mere formalities. They were lifelines, carefully crafted to maintain fragile alliances. A scribe's error could be seen as incompetence or, worse, sabotage. Court records from the period, preserved in the state papers, mention scribes reprimanded or dismissed for lesser mistakes. 1. A man named Richard Holt was banished from court for miscopying a trade agreement in 1584. You wonder if your name will join his in obscurity. Elizabeth stops pacing, her eyes locking onto yours. Tell me, scribe, she says, her voice low but laced with venom. Do you know the labor of a queen? The nights spent weighing words, the days spent watching for knives. You swallow, your throat dry. Her temper, you realize, is not just about your error, it's about the endless pressure she faces. Her youth, marked by imprisonment and betrayal, taught her to wield anger like a shield, but it also left scars. You've heard stories from older scribes, how she once slapped a maid for a torn hem, how she berated a counselor until he knelt for forgiveness. Yet you've also heard of her mercy, her ability to turn rage into charm when it suited her. I am sorry, Your Majesty. You manage, your voice barely above a whisper. I meant no harm. I can rewrite the letter, correct the title. She laughs, a sharp, mirthless sound that makes you flinch. Rewrite, she says. And what of the ambassador who received your insult? Shall I send him your apologies with my seal? The courtiers shift uncomfortably, and you feel their eyes like weights. Burgley clears his throat, stepping forward. Your Majesty, the boy is young. The error was caught before the letter was sent. Perhaps a reprimand will suffice. His voice is steady, but you sense his caution. He's seen Elizabeth's temper destroy men before. You glance at the letter on the table, its wax seal glinting in the light. Burgley's words offer a glimmer of hope. Your mistake was caught by a clerk before it reached France. A small mercy, but Elizabeth's temper is not so easily soothed. She turns to you, her face a mask of controlled fury. You think your work small, Weaver. You think your quill does not carry my crown. Her voice rises, and you feel the room shrink. Every word you write is England's voice. Every error is my shame. You bow your head, praying she'll stop there, but she steps closer, her presence overwhelming. Give me one reason I should not cast you from my court. Your mind races. You're no courtier, trained in flattery or politics. You're a scribe, your world one of ink and precision. But you've survived 3 years in this palace, navigating its whispers and rivalries. You think of your father, a printer in London, who taught you the value of words. Your Majesty, you say, your voice steadier now. I know my error was grave, but I swear to serve you better. My quill is yours, to write England's strength. It's a desperate plea, but you see a flicker in her eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or amusement. Elizabeth studies you, her fingers tracing the edge of her prayer book. The room waits, the silence heavy. You've heard tales of her temper's aftermath, courtiers dismissed, servants whipped, even nobles humiliated. But you've also heard of her pragmatism. She needs scribes, especially now, with war looming. The historical record shows she often balanced rage with calculation. In 1585, she pardoned a young page who spilled wine on her gown, reportedly because he was skilled at lute playing. Could your skill with a quill save you? She turns away, looking out the window at the Thames, its waters gray under a winter sky. You will rewrite the letter, she says finally, her voice softer but still sharp. And you will work under Master Walsingham's eye until I trust your hand again. You exhale, relief flooding you, but her next words chill you. Fail me again, and no quill will save you. She dismisses you with a wave, and you bow, backing out of the chamber. The courtier's eyes follow you, some pitying, some scornful, as you return to your desk, your heart still racing. You realize Elizabeth's temper has spared you for now, but the fear lingers, a shadow over every word you write. You've seen her anger's power, its ability to shape decisions and bend men to her will. But what will happen if you err again, and her temper finds no reason to relent? You're back at your cramped desk in Richmond Palace. 1585, the faint glow of a single candle casting shadows across your parchment. The air is cold, the windows rattling with a late winter wind, but your hands are steady now, your quill moving with deliberate care. It's been a week since you stood trembling before Elizabeth I, her temper a blade held to your throat over a miswritten letter to the French ambassador. Her verdict to rewrite the letter under Sir Francis Walsingham's scrutiny spared you from dismissal, but the fear of her wrath still lingers, a quiet pulse beneath your every stroke. You, Thomas Weaver, a humble scribe, have tasted the edge of the Queen's fury and survived. But survival in her court Your learning is never certain. The task before you is daunting. The corrected letter to the French ambassador lies on your desk, its words meticulously chosen to reaffirm England's alliance against Spain. Walsingham, the Queen's spymaster, looms nearby, his sharp eyes scanning every line you write. His presence is a reminder of Elizabeth's warning, "Fail me again, and no quill will save you." You've rewritten the letter 3 times already, each draft dissected for errors, your calligraphy scrutinized for perfection. The pressure is immense, but you've begun to understand the weight of your role. Your quill, once a tool of routine, is now a thread in the tapestry of England's survival, and Elizabeth's temper has made that clear. The historical record underscores the stakes of your work. In 1585, England was a nation under siege, not yet by armies, but by plots and diplomacy. The Treaty of Nonsuch had committed Elizabeth to aid the Dutch against Spain, a decision that inflamed tensions with Philip II. France, though a wavering ally, was critical to counterbalancing Spanish power. A single misstep in a letter, like your error in addressing the ambassador, could signal weakness or disrespect. Unraveling fragile alliances, court records from the period, preserved in the state papers, detail the meticulous care given to diplomatic correspondence. Scribes were expected to be flawless, their work a reflection of the Queen's authority. Your mistake, though caught before it reached France, exposed you to Elizabeth's temper, a force that could break or forge those who served her. You pause, dipping your quill in ink, and glance at Walsingham. His face is unreadable, but you've heard whispers of his own encounters with the Queen's rage, how she once berated him for days over a failed spy mission. Elizabeth's temper, you've learned, was not just a personal trait, but a political lever. Her outbursts, documented in letters by courtiers like John Harrington, were often calculated, designed to instill fear or force compliance. Yet they were also human, born of a life spent navigating betrayal and danger. At 52, Elizabeth carried the scars of her youth imprisonment, the threat of execution, the loss of her mother. Her temper was her armor, but it could also be her undoing, pushing allies away or forcing rash decisions. As you write, you recall the Privy Chamber, the moment Elizabeth's eyes met yours. Her anger was a storm, but her mercy, sparing you with a chance to prove yourself, was a surprise. You've since learned from other scribes that such mercy was rare, but not unheard of. In 1585, Elizabeth pardoned a young clerk who misfiled a trade agreement, reportedly because his father was a loyal servant. Your skill with a quill, honed over years of copying manuscripts, may have saved you, but you also sense that Elizabeth's temper serves a larger purpose. By sparing you, she ensures your loyalty, binding you to her service through fear and gratitude. Walsingham clears his throat, breaking your thoughts. Weaver, he says, his voice low, the Queen will see this letter tomorrow. Ensure it is perfect. You nod, your fingers tightening around the quill. You've rewritten the salutation, His Grace, the Ambassador of France, 12 times, each letter precise. The body of the letter, affirming England's commitment to mutual defense, flows smoothly now. Your calligraphy, a testament to your resolve. You've learned to double-check every word, to anticipate the Queen's scrutiny. Her temper has sharpened your focus, turning your once mechanical task into a matter of survival. The palace is quiet, the other scribes long gone to their beds. You work late, the candle burning low, driven by a need to prove yourself. You've heard stories of Elizabeth's court, beyond the privy chamber, servants who survived her outbursts by skill or luck, courtiers who fell from favor over a single misstep. One tale, whispered in the scullery, tells of a page who dropped a tray during a banquet and was banished to the country, only to be recalled when Elizabeth needed his knowledge of Spanish. Her temper was unpredictable, but so was her pragmatism. You wonder if your redemption lies in her need for reliable scribes in a time of crisis. As you finish the letter, Walsingham takes it, his eyes scanning the page. He nods, a rare gesture of approval, and you feel a weight lift. "This will do," he says, turning to leave. You're alone now, the candle flickering, and you allow yourself a moment to breathe. Elizabeth's temper has marked you, but it's also taught you resilience. You've survived her wrath, not by cunning or flattery, but by the quiet skill of your quill. The historical record shows that many in her court scribes, maids, even nobles learned to navigate her moods, their survival a testament to human adaptability in the face of power. Reflecting on this moment, you see how Elizabeth's temper shaped not just your life, but the lives of countless others. Her anger was a crucible, forging loyalty and discipline in a court rife with intrigue. It pushed England through crises, from the Spanish threat to the Dutch rebellion, by demanding excellence from those who served her. Your story, though small, mirrors the resilience of a nation under her rule. Today, we might see her temper as a flaw, but in 1585 it was a force that held a fragile kingdom together. It reminds you that even the smallest role's yours. A scribe's can leave a mark on history, shaped by the tempests of those who lead. What might your quill write next? In a court where every word carries the weight of a queen's wrath. You're standing in the gallery of Greenwich Palace. 1592, the late afternoon sun filtering through leaded windows, casting a golden glow over the polished floor. The air carries the faint scent of lavender from the rushes strewn beneath your feet. But there's no sweetness in the tension that grips you. You're Sir Henry Brooke, a minor courtier, newly risen to favor in Elizabeth I's court, your doublet freshly embroidered with silver thread to signal your ambition. At 32, you've spent years clawing your way into the Queen's inner circle, a world of whispers, flattery, and danger. But today, your heart races with a fear you've never known, for you've just heard the news. Elizabeth is furious, and her anger is aimed at you. The cause is a letter you penned to a Scottish noble, James Douglas, Earl of Morton, suggesting a trade agreement that would bolster England's northern borders. You meant it as a bold move, a way to prove your worth amid the court's endless rivalries. But you acted without Elizabeth's explicit approval, a grave misstep. The letter, intercepted by her spies, has reached her desk, and now you've been summoned to face her in the presence chamber. Elizabeth's temper, a force as legendary as her crown, is no mere tale. To you now it's a storm you must weather, and you're not sure if your wit or charm will be enough to save you. Elizabeth I, now 59, is a queen at the height of her power, but also her paranoia. In 1592, her court is a cauldron of intrigue, with Spain's threat lingering despite the Armada's defeat 4 years earlier. The succession question looms. Elizabeth, childless, refuses to name an heir, and courtiers like you scramble to secure favor in a future that's uncertain. Her temper, documented in letters by men like Robert Cecil, is a constant shadow. A 1592 diary entry from a lady in waiting describes Elizabeth shattering a glass goblet in a rage over a delayed dispatch. Her outbursts, often theatrical, are also deeply personal, rooted in a lifetime of betrayal, her mother's execution, her sister's suspicion, her own imprisonment. You've seen her charm ambassadors with a smile, only to turn and berate a counselor until he trembles. Now, you're the target. You adjust your ruff, your hands unsteady, and make your way to the presence chamber. The corridor is lined with courtiers, their eyes flickering with curiosity and pity. You catch a whisper from a page. The queen's in a fury. Brooke's done for. You've heard the stories, how she banished a favorite, Walter Raleigh, for a secret marriage, how she struck a maid for a crooked bow. Your letter to Morton was meant to show initiative, to counter the growing influence of Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, whose charm outshines yours. But Elizabeth guards her authority jealously, and acting without her consent is a gamble that could cost you everything. The historical record paints a vivid picture of 1592. England was rebuilding after the Armada, its coffers strained, its alliances fragile. Scotland, under James VI, was a key but unsteady ally, and unauthorized diplomacy, like your letter, could be seen as treasonous. The state papers note Elizabeth's increasing sensitivity to perceived slights, her temper flaring over minor breaches of protocol. Courtiers like you were expected to navigate her moods, balancing ambition with obedience. A misstep could mean exile, imprisonment, or worse. You recall a tale of a courtier, Edward Stafford, dismissed in 1587 for a similar overreach, his name erased from court records. Your stomach churns as you wonder if you'll share his fate. You enter the presence chamber, its walls draped with tapestries of Tudor roses. Elizabeth sits on a cushioned throne, her white painted face stark against her black velvet gown, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. Robert Cecil, her trusted secretary, stands nearby, his expression unreadable. Essex, your rival, lounges to one side, his smirk barely concealed. You bow low, your heart pounding. The room is crowded with courtiers, their silence oppressive. Elizabeth's fingers tap a slow rhythm on her armrest, a sign you've learned to dread. Sir Henry Brooke, she says, her voice low but cutting. You presume to speak for your queen. The words are a lash, and you feel the weight of every eye in the room. You straighten, forcing your voice to remain steady. Your Majesty, I sought only to strengthen your realm, to secure Scotland's friendship. Her eyes narrow, and you sense the storm building. Friendship. She snaps, rising from her throne. You think to play king in my court, writing letters as if my crown were yours. Her voice rises, echoing off the walls, and you flinch, the memory of her temper's victims flashing through your mind. Cecil shifts, perhaps preparing to intervene, but Elizabeth's glare silences him. You're alone, your ambition now. A noose tightening around you. Her temper, you realize, is not just anger, it's a test. Elizabeth uses her rage to gauge loyalty, to separate the bold from the reckless. You've seen her spare others courtiers who flattered their way out of her wrath, but you're no Essex. With his easy charm, your strength is your mind, your knowledge of trade and borders. But will it be enough? The room waits, the air thick with anticipation. You think of your family, your modest estate in Kent, and the years spent climbing to this moment to lose it all now because of one letter is unthinkable. Elizabeth steps closer, her gaze boring into you. Speak, Brooke, she says, her voice a dangerous whisper. Why should I trust a man who acts without my leave? Your mind races, searching for words to turn her anger. Will your gamble save you, or will her temper cast you from her court forever? You're still in the presence chamber of Greenwich Palace, 1592, the weight of Elizabeth Burford's gaze pinning you like a moth to a board. The tapestries seem to close in, their woven roses, a reminder of the Tudor power you've dared to overstep. You, Sir Henry Brooke, a courtier who dreamed of rising in the Queen's favor, now stand accused of unauthorized diplomacy, a letter to the Scottish Earl of Morton that bypassed her authority. Her temper, a force that has broken stronger men, crackles in the air, her words still ringing. Why should I trust a man who acts without my leave? Your heart hammers, but you know this moment is a tightrope. One false step, and you'll fall from her court, perhaps forever. The chamber is crowded, the courtier's eyes flickering with a mix of pity and glee. Robert Cecil, the Queen's sharp-eyed secretary, stands stiffly, his fingers clasped as if bracing for the storm. Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, your rival, watches with a barely concealed smirk, his charm a constant threat to your ambitions. You've spent years navigating this court, learning its unwritten rules. Flatter the Queen, avoid her wrath, and never outshine her. But your letter to Morton, meant to secure a trade deal and bolster your standing, was a miscalculation. Elizabeth's temper, you realize, is not just about your error, it's about her need to control a court, teetering on the edge of chaos. The historical context of 1592 sharpens the stakes. Elizabeth, at 59, was a queen under pressure. The Armada's defeat in 1588 had secured her legend, but Spain's threat lingered, and her treasury was strained by wars in the Netherlands. Scotland, under James VI, was a vital but prickly ally, its loyalty uncertain as the succession question loomed. Elizabeth's refusal to name an heir fueled rivalries among her courtiers, each vying for influence in a future court. Your letter, though well-intentioned, was a breach of protocol, a challenge to her authority. The state papers record similar incidents. Courtiers like Edward Stafford, dismissed for unauthorized dealings, or Walter Raleigh, banished for a secret marriage. Elizabeth's temper, as noted in a 1592 letter by Cecil, was a fire that spares none who cross her will. Yet she often tempered it with pragmatism, sparing those who proved useful. You take a breath, your voice steady, despite the fear coiling in your gut. Your Majesty, you begin, bowing low. My letter to Morton was no presumption, but a servant's zeal to strengthen your realm. Scotland's trade could shield our borders, and I sought only to lay the path for your wisdom to follow. The words are careful, laced with flattery, but Elizabeth's eyes narrow. My wisdom, she says, her voice a blade. You think to guide my hand, Brooke, as if I am some doddering dame. She steps forward, her black velvet gown rustling, and you feel the room's attention tighten. Her temper is a living thing, its heat washing over you, and you know one wrong word could end your career. You glance at Cecil, hoping for support, but his face is a mask. Essex's smirk widens, and you curse his effortless charm. You've seen Elizabeth's temper turn on others, how she berated a counselor for a poorly timed jest, how she banished a lady in waiting for gossiping about her health. But you've also seen her mercy, like when she forgave a young page for spilling wine, charmed by his quick apology. Your strength is your knowledge of trade, your years studying England's economy. But flattery is not your gift. You must rely on truth, tempered with humility, to survive this moment. Your Majesty, you continue, your voice low but firm. I am no king to presume your place. My letter was a draft, meant for your approval, a humble offer to ease your burdens. It's a half-truth. The letter was sent, intercepted only by chance. But you pray she'll see your intent. Elizabeth pauses, her fingers tapping her prayer book, a habit you've noticed in moments of decision. The room holds its breath, the courtiers waiting for her next move. You recall a story from a fellow courtier, how Elizabeth once spared a man who admitted his fault with bold honesty, valuing his candor over his error. Will she see your ambition as loyalty or as betrayal? She turns to Cecil, her voice sharp. What say you, Master Cecil? Is this man's zeal worth my trust, or is he another fool reaching for my crown? Cecil steps forward, his tone measured. Your Majesty, Brooke's intent was to serve, though his haste was folly. His knowledge of trade is sound, and England has need of such men. His words are a lifeline, but Elizabeth's temper is not so easily swayed. She rounds on you, her eyes blazing. Need. She snaps. I need men who obey, not those who play ambassador without my leave. Her voice echoes, and you flinch, the weight of her anger pressing against you. But then, something shifts. Elizabeth sits, her movements slow, her gaze still fixed on you. You have one chance. Brooke, she says, her voice quieter now, but no less dangerous. Prove your loyalty, and I may forget this trespass. Fail, and you'll find no mercy in my court. She waves a hand, dismissing you, and you bow, your legs weak with relief. The courtiers murmur, some disappointed, others intrigued. Essex's smirk falters, and you feel a flicker of triumph, but it's overshadowed by the fear of what's to come. Elizabeth's temper has spared you, but her trust is a fragile thing, and you've yet to earn it. As you leave the chamber, the corridor's chill seeps into your bones. You've survived her wrath, but the cost is clear. Every step, every word will be watched. You think of the court's endless dance ambition, fear, and the queen's unpredictable moods. Her temper has shaped you, forcing you to weigh every action against her will. But what will she demand to prove your loyalty? And can you navigate her rage to secure your place in her court? You're standing in a small antechamber of Greenwich Palace, 1592, the air heavy with the scent of wax and old wood, your doublet damp with sweat, despite the autumn chill. It's been days since you, Sir Henry Brooke, faced Elizabeth I's wrath in the presence chamber, her temper a blade held to your ambitions over an unauthorized letter to the Scottish Earl of Morton. Her words prove your loyalty, and I may forget this trespass echo in your mind, a fragile lifeline that has kept you in her court. Now you've been summoned again, this time to present a trade proposal to strengthen ties with Scotland, a task she's set to test your worth. You clutch a sheaf of papers, your heart pounding, knowing that her temper could still cast you out if you falter. The antechamber is quiet, save for the distant murmur of courtiers beyond the door. You've spent sleepless nights drafting this proposal, consulting merchants, and studying maps of northern trade routes. Your goal is to secure England's borders without provoking Spain, a delicate balance in a court where every move is scrutinized. Elizabeth's temper, you've learned, is not just a personal storm, but a force that shapes her realm. At 59, she rules with an iron will, her outbursts documented in letters by Robert Cecil and others, both a weapon to control her court and a reflection of her fears. The succession crisis looms, Spain's threat lingers, and your misstep has placed you at the mercy of her volatile moods. The historical record of 1592 paints a court on edge. Elizabeth's victory over the Spanish Armada in 1588 was a triumph, but it drained her treasury, and wars in the Netherlands stretched her resources thin. Scotland, under James VI, was a critical ally, but its loyalty was uncertain, and unauthorized diplomacy, like your letter, could destabilize fragile ties. The state papers note Elizabeth's increasing irritability, her temper flaring over breaches of protocol. Courtiers like you walked a tightrope, balancing ambition with obedience. A 1592 account from a lady-in-waiting describes Elizabeth berating a noble for a poorly worded speech, only to reward him days later for his contrition. Your survival depends on navigating this duality, her rage and her pragmatism. You're ushered into the presence chamber, smaller now with only a handful of advisors. Robert Cecil, his gaze steady, and the Earl of Essex, your rival, whose charm still overshadows you. Elizabeth sits on a cushioned chair, her white painted face a mask, her fingers drumming a familiar rhythm. You bow low, your papers trembling in your hands. "Sir Henry," she says, her voice cool but edged with warning, "you claim to serve my realm. Show me." The room feels like a trap, her temper a coiled spring. You've seen her spare others a page who amused her, a counselor who flattered her, but you know one misstep could end you. You begin, your voice steady despite the knot in your chest. "Your Majesty, my proposal strengthens trade with Scotland, securing wool and grain routes to bolster our northern defenses." You outline the plan, merchant agreements, fortified ports, and a treaty to align James VI's interests with England's. You've avoided grand promises, knowing her suspicion of overreaching ambition. Her eyes never leave you, and you feel the weight of her scrutiny, as if she's searching for the flaw that sparked her anger days ago. Cecil nods slightly, a rare sign of approval, but Essex leans forward, his voice smooth. "A fine plan, Your Majesty, but costly. Perhaps a bolder hand like mine could negotiate directly with James." You stiffen, his jab a reminder of your precarious position. Elizabeth's fingers pause, and you brace yourself. "Boldness," she says, her tone sharp. "Boldness brought me your letter, Brooke, and nearly cost me Scotland's trust." Her voice rises, and you feel the familiar heat of her temper. "Do you think me so feeble? I need courtiers to play king." The room freezes, and you see Cecil tense, ready to intervene. You've heard tales of her rages, how she banished Walter Raleigh for his marriage, how she humiliated a maid for a torn gown, but you've also seen her reward loyalty. Your proposal is sound, but her temper demands more than competence. It demands submission. "Your Majesty," you say, bowing lower, "I am but your servant, offering my mind to your will. This plan serves only to strengthen your crown." You pause, choosing your words with care. My error was haste, not disloyalty, and I beg your grace to judge my work, not my fault. The words are a gamble, echoing the humility she spared others for. Her eyes soften, just a fraction, and you sense a shift. Elizabeth's temper, you realize, is as much about testing loyalty as punishing error. She needs men like you, capable, but not too bold to navigate her fractured court. She leans back, her gaze still sharp, but less venomous. Your plan has merit, she says finally, her voice measured. Cecil, see it implemented, but under my terms. She turns to you, her expression unreadable. You remain in my court, Brooke, but know this, my trust is not easily won. You bow, relief flooding you, though her warning lingers. Essex's smirk fades, and you feel a flicker of triumph, tempered by the knowledge that her temper could flare again at any moment. As you leave the chamber, the weight of your survival settles over you. Elizabeth's temper has spared you, but it's also reshaped you, forcing you to temper ambition with caution. The historical record shows that many in her court courtiers, scribes, maids learned to navigate her moods, their resilience a quiet force in England's story. Your proposal, if successful, will strengthen ties with Scotland, a small but vital step in securing her reign. Her temper, a fire that could have consumed you, instead forged your place in her court. However fragile, reflecting on this moment, you see how Elizabeth's temper was a crucible for her era. It demanded loyalty, shaped policies, and held a nation together through fear and awe. Your survival mirrors the resilience of those who served her, their small victories building the foundation of her legacy. Today, we might view her temper as a flaw, but in 1592, it was a force that defined a golden age. It makes you wonder, how do our own battles with power and passion shape the legacies we leave behind? You're standing in the drafty hall of Whitehall Palace, 1586, your polished boots echoing softly on the stone floor as you await your audience with Elizabeth I. You are Don Alvaro de Bazan, a Spanish ambassador sent by King Philip II. Your velvet cloak, heavy with the weight of your mission and the fear of the Queen's notorious temper. The air smells of wax and wet wool, the October rain drumming against the leaded windows. You've heard the tales, Elizabeth's rages, sudden as a summer storm, have reduced seasoned courtiers to silence and sent envoys fleeing her court. Now, as you clutch a sealed letter from your king, you wonder if your words will provoke her wrath or secure the fragile peace between Spain and England. One misstep, and you could ignite a war. Your mission is delicate. Philip II, eager to avoid open conflict after years of escalating tensions, has sent you to negotiate trade concessions and ease the strain caused by English privateers raiding Spanish ships. But the court is a viper's nest, and Elizabeth's temper is its deadliest fang. At 53, she is a queen forged in fire, surviving plots, rebellions, and the shadow of her Catholic cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. Her temper, as you've been warned by your predecessor, Don Bernardino de Mendoza, is both a weapon and a shield, wielded to keep foreign diplomats off balance. You've prepared for this moment, rehearsing your words, but the weight of her reputation unsettles you. The historical record of 1586 underscores the stakes. England and Spain were locked in a Cold War, with the Spanish Armada still 2 years away, but already a looming threat. Elizabeth's support for Dutch rebels against Spanish rule had infuriated Philip, while his backing of Catholic plots against her fueled her paranoia. Ambassadors like you were pawns in a high-stakes game, their every word scrutinized. A 1586 letter from a French envoy describes Elizabeth berating a diplomat until he stood like a statue, pale and mute. Your predecessor, Mendoza, was expelled in 1584 for plotting, and you know your presence in her court is a gamble. One wrong phrase could see you banished or worse. You adjust your ruff, your hands steady, despite the knot in your stomach. A page approaches, his face impassive, and leads you through a corridor lined with tapestries of English victories. Whispers follow you, servants and courtiers eyeing the Spaniard in their midst. You've heard of Elizabeth's outbursts, how she threw a slipper at a counselor for a clumsy remark, how she banished a lady-in-waiting for a whispered jest. Your letter proposes a trade agreement, English wool for Spanish wine, but it also carries a veiled warning: cease privateering or face Philip's wrath. You know this could provoke her, but your king demands boldness. You enter the presence chamber, its high ceiling adorned with gilded beams. Elizabeth sits on a throne draped in crimson, her white-painted face stark against her dark gown, her red-gold hair catching the torchlight. Her advisors flank her: William Cecil, Lord Burghley, his eyes wary, and Sir Francis Walsingham, whose spies likely know every word of your letter already. You bow deeply, your heart racing. The room is silent, save for the crackle of the fire. Don Alvaro, Elizabeth says, her voice smooth but edged. You bring words from Spain. Let us hear them. Her fingers tap her armrest. A gesture you've been told signals her mood, calm now, but ready to flare. You present the letter, your voice measured. Your Majesty, my king seeks peace through trade, offering wine and gold for your wool. If England's ships cease their raids, you pause, gauging her reaction. Her eyes narrow, and you feel the air tighten. Peace, she says, her tone sharp. Your king speaks of peace, while his gold funds plots against my throne. Her voice rises, and you flinch, sensing the storm. Burghley shifts, but Walsingham's gaze is cold, his silence a warning. You've heard of Elizabeth's temper, turning on diplomats, how she humiliated a French envoy for a poorly worded greeting. Your letter, though diplomatic, carries Philip's threat, and you know it could be your undoing. The historical record confirms her volatility. In 1586, with Mary, Queen of Scots, still a prisoner and Catholic conspiracies rife, Elizabeth's temper was a tool to assert dominance. A courtier's diary from that year recounts her shouting at a Dutch ambassador until he apologized on his knees. Yet she was also pragmatic, often using her rage to extract concessions without breaking alliances. You're no stranger to royal courts, having served in France and the Netherlands. But Elizabeth's unpredictability unnerves you. Is her temper a performance or a genuine fire that could burn you? Your Majesty, you say, bowing again, my king desires only friendship, but he cannot abide the loss of his ships. You choose your words carefully, avoiding defiance, but her eyes flash. Friendship, she snaps, rising from her throne. You come to my court with demands, as if I am some merchant to haggle. Her voice echoes, and you feel the room's eyes on you, the courtiers waiting for your fall. Your mission hangs by a thread, and Elizabeth's temper is the blade that could cut it. Will your words soothe her, or will her rage send you back to Spain in disgrace? You're still in the presence chamber of Whitehall Palace, 1586, the air thick with the weight of Elizabeth I's words, her temper a storm barely contained. You, Don Alvaro de Bazan, Spanish ambassador, stand before her, your velvet cloak feeling heavier with every passing moment. The Queen's sharp retort, "You come to my court with demands, as if I am some merchant to haggle," hangs in the air, her voice a lash that silences the room. Her eyes, bright with fury, bore into you, and you sense the delicate thread of your mission fraying. The letter from Philip II, proposing trade concessions, but carrying a veiled threat against English privateering, has ignited her wrath. You must navigate this storm, or risk not just your reputation, but the fragile peace between Spain and England. The chamber is a sea of watchful faces. William Cecil, Lord Burghley, his expression cautious, and Sir Francis Walsingham, whose spymaster's gaze seems to dissect your every word. The courtiers, their silks rustling softly, lean forward, eager for the spectacle of your downfall. You've faced hostile courts before, in France and the Low Countries, but Elizabeth's temper is unlike any other, a blend of calculated theatrics and raw emotion, honed by decades of survival. At 53, she rules a nation under siege, with Catholic plots and the shadow of Mary, Queen of Scots, fueling her paranoia. Your letter, meant to secure trade and curb privateering, has instead struck at her pride, and you feel the weight of her crown in her stare. The historical context of 1586 sharpens the stakes. England and Spain were locked in a tense stalemate, with the Spanish Armada's threat growing and Elizabeth's support for Dutch rebels infuriating Philip II. Diplomacy was a battlefield, every word a potential spark for war. The state papers record Elizabeth's volatility. Her outbursts against envoys were legendary, like the time she berated a Polish diplomat for questioning her authority, leaving him trembling and mute. As a courtier noted, yet her temper was also strategic, a tool to assert dominance while preserving alliances. Your predecessor, Mendoza, was expelled in 1584 for plotting, and you know Walsingham's spies have scrutinized your every move. A misstep now could see you banished, or worse, could tip England and Spain toward open conflict. You bow low, your heart pounding, but your voice steady. Your Majesty, you say, my king seeks only mutual benefit, not to diminish your sovereignty. Trade strengthens both our realms, and I humbly offer Spain's friendship. The words are careful, but her fingers tap faster on her armrest. A sign you've learned to dread. Friendship, she says, her voice low but cutting. Your ships carry gold to my enemies, and you speak of friendship. She steps forward, her gown sweeping the floor, and you feel the room shrink. Do you think me blind to your king's plots? Don Alvaro, her temper flares, and you flinch, the memory of Mendoza's expulsion vivid in your mind. You glance at Burghley, hoping for a sign of support, but his face is impassive. Walsingham's eyes narrow, and you know he's likely read your letter's subtext, a warning that Spain will retaliate if privateering continues. You've heard tales of Elizabeth's rages, how she threw a goblet at a counselor for a clumsy jest, how she banished a maid for a whispered rumor. But you've also heard of her pragmatism, how she spared a French envoy after a public outburst. Securing a trade deal days later, your mission is to preserve peace, but her temper demands submission, and you must find a way to offer it without losing Spain's dignity. Your Majesty, you say, your tone softer. Spain desires peace. As I know you do, the seas are troubled, but trade can calm them. I beg your wisdom to guide this matter. You lower your eyes, a gesture of humility, hoping to appease her. Elizabeth pauses, her gaze still sharp, but her posture easing slightly. The room waits, the silence heavy. You recall a story from a fellow diplomat, how Elizabeth once forgave a Venetian envoy for a bold proposal, charmed by his quick wit. Your strength is your experience, your years navigating Europe's courts, but Elizabeth's temper is a puzzle even you struggle to solve. She turns to Walsingham, her voice cold. What say you, Master Walsingham? Does this Spaniard speak truth, or is he another serpent in my court? Walsingham steps forward, his tone measured. His words are fair, your Majesty, but his king's actions bear watching. Let him prove his intent with deeds. His caution is a lifeline, but Elizabeth's temper is not so easily quelled. She rounds on you, her voice rising. Deeds, she snaps. Your deeds are raids on my ships, plots in my realm. You think to bargain with me while your king sharpens his knives. The courtiers murmur, and you feel their eyes like daggers. Your mission teeters on the edge of failure. But then Elizabeth sits, her movements deliberate, her eyes still locked on you. Don Alvaro, she says, her voice quieter, but no less piercing. You will remain in my court, but your trade proposal will wait. Prove your king's goodwill, and I may hear you again. The words are a reprieve, but the warning is clear. Her temper is a leash, and you're not free of it. You bow deeply, your heart still racing, and back out of the chamber, the courtier's whispers following you like a tide. Burgley nods faintly, a sign of grudging respect, while Walsingham's gaze remains cold. You've survived, but the encounter has left you shaken, your mission hanging by a thread. As you step into the corridor, the rain's patter against the windows mirrors your unease. Elizabeth's temper has spared you, but it's also a reminder of her power, a force that bends even seasoned diplomats to her will. You've navigated her rage, but the cost is clear. Every word, every gesture must be measured against her unpredictable moods. The historical record shows that ambassadors like you were often caught in her tempests, their careers shaped by her ability to wield anger as a tool. In 1586, a Dutch envoy secured a treaty after enduring her wrath, his humility winning her favor. Your own survival depends on a similar balance. Diplomacy, tempered by submission. You pause, adjusting your cloak, and reflect on the stakes. Your letter, though bold, was meant to preserve peace, but Elizabeth's temper has forced you to tread more carefully. The trade agreement, if accepted, could ease tensions with Spain, but her anger has delayed it, leaving you to prove your worth in a court that trusts no foreigner. You think of the countless diplomats before you, their names recorded or erased by the whims of monarchs. Elizabeth's temper, you realize, is not just a personal trait, but a force that shapes nations, bending men like you to her will. What will she demand to prove Spain's goodwill? And can you navigate her temper to secure peace, or will her rage unravel your mission entirely? You're standing in a small, candlelit chamber in Whitehall Palace. 1586, the air heavy with the scent of burning wax and the faint dampness of the Thames seeping through the walls. It's been a week since you, Don Alvaro de Bazan, Spanish ambassador, faced Elizabeth I's searing temper in the presence chamber, her words a sharp reminder of your precarious position. Prove your king's goodwill, and I may hear you again. Your mission to secure a trade agreement and curb English privateering hangs by a thread, and now you've been summoned to present evidence of Spain's commitment to peace. Your hands clutch a new set of documents, proposals for mutual trade and assurances of Philip II's restraint. But the memory of Elizabeth's rage makes your heart pound. One misstep, and her temper could end your mission and perhaps your career. The chamber is smaller than the presence chamber, its intimacy more daunting than the grandeur of your last encounter. Elizabeth sits at a carved oak table, her black gown stark against her pale, painted face, her eyes sharp as ever. Only William Cecil, Lord Burghley, and Sir Francis Walsingham are present, their presence a reminder of the stakes. Your every word will be weighed, your every gesture scrutinized. You've spent the week crafting this proposal, consulting with Spanish merchants, and carefully wording assurances to appease Elizabeth without weakening Philip's position. But her temper, a force you've now felt firsthand, looms over you like a storm cloud, unpredictable and unforgiving. The historical record of 1586 paints a tense backdrop. England and Spain were teetering on the edge of war, with Elizabeth's support for Dutch rebels and English privateers raiding Spanish ships, fueling Philip II's anger. The execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, was imminent, and Catholic plots against Elizabeth were rife. Many backed by Spanish gold, ambassadors like you were caught in a deadly game, their words a delicate balance between defiance and diplomacy. The state papers document Elizabeth's volatility. Her temper could flare over a single phrase, as when she berated a French envoy for implying her navy was weak, leaving him pale and stammering, according to a courtier's account. Yet her pragmatism often followed, as when she secured a trade deal with Venice after a similar outburst. Your survival depends on navigating this duality. You bow low, presenting your documents. Your Majesty, you begin, your voice steady despite the knot in your chest. My king offers renewed trade wool for wine, cloth for gold, and pledges to curb Catholic plots. If England's ships cease their raids, you pause, watching her closely. Her fingers, no longer tapping, rest still on the table, a sign you've learned to interpret as cautious interest. But her eyes are unyielding, and you know her temper could erupt at any moment. Goodwill, she says, her voice low but edged with steel. Your king speaks of goodwill while his priests whisper rebellion in my realm. The accusation stings, and you feel the weight of Walsingham's gaze, his spies likely aware of every Spanish ship that sails. You've heard the tales of her rages, how she threw a book at a counselor for a poorly timed jest, how she banished an ambassador for a careless word. But you've also seen her mercy, sparing those who prove their value. Your predecessor, Mendoza, was expelled for plotting, but you've taken pains to distance yourself from his schemes. Your Majesty, you say, bowing again, Spain seeks peace, not rebellion. These proposals strengthen both our crowns, and I am but a servant to your wisdom. The flattery is deliberate, a nod to her pride, but her lips tighten, and you brace yourself. Servant, she says, rising, her voice rising with her, You serve a king who dreams of my throne, and you think words will blind me. The room tenses, and you feel Burgley's eyes flicker toward you, perhaps a warning to tread carefully. You think of your years in European courts, navigating monarchs' moods, but Elizabeth's temper is a force apart. It's not just anger, it's a performance, a test of your resolve. You recall a story from a Dutch diplomat, how Elizabeth raged at him for a failed treaty, only to grant him an audience days later when he offered a new proposal. Your documents are sound trade routes mapped, profits calculated, but her temper demands more than logic. Your Majesty, you say, your voice softer, I offer my king's pledge and my own honor. Let us build peace, not war. With these terms, you gesture to the papers, praying she'll see the value in your work. Elizabeth pauses, her gaze shifting to Burgley. What say you, my lord? She asks, her tone still sharp. Burgley steps forward, his voice calm. The proposals are fair, your Majesty, and could ease our burdens. But Spain's actions must match its words. His caution is a lifeline. But Elizabeth's temper is not yet spent. She turns back to you, her eyes blazing. Fair, she snaps. I will have deeds, not promises. Don Alvaro, your king's gold fuels my enemies, prove it does not, or you'll find no welcome here. Her words are a challenge, and you bow, accepting it. I will, your Majesty. You say, your heart steadying, Spain's deeds will speak. She dismisses you with a wave, and you back out, the weight of her temper lingering. You've survived, your mission intact, but her challenge to prove Spain's goodwill looms large. The trade agreement, if accepted, could delay war, but her rage has made clear the cost of failure. The historical record shows that Elizabeth's temper shaped her diplomacy, forcing envoys to bend or break. In 1586, a French ambassador secured a treaty after enduring her wrath, his persistence earning her respect. Your own resilience has kept you in her court, but the path ahead is fraught. Reflecting on this moment, you see how Elizabeth's temper was a crucible for her era. It tested loyalty, shaped alliances, and held England together in a time of crisis. Your survival, a small victory, mirrors the resilience of those who navigated her court, their efforts stitching together a nation's survival. Today, we might see her temper as a flaw, but in 1586, it was a force that defined an age, bending even foreign ambassadors to her will. It makes you wonder, how do the tempests of power, then and now, shape the delicate dance of peace? You're standing in the dimly lit privy chamber of Hampton Court Palace, 1588, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and the faint tang of fear. It's a sweltering July day, and the windows are open, letting in the distant hum of the Thames. You're John Whitgift, Archbishop of Canterbury and a member of Elizabeth I's Privy Council, your black robes heavy with the weight of your office. At 58, you've served the Queen for years, navigating her moods with the caution of a man who knows her temper's power. Today, though, the Council faces a crisis that could unleash her wrath like never before. And you, like your fellow counselors, are treading on thin ice. The room is tense, the long oak table surrounded by the Queen's most trusted advisors, William Cecil, Lord Burgley, his face etched with worry, Sir Francis Walsingham, his eyes sharp with calculation, and Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, his usual bravado muted. The Spanish Armada, A vast fleet sent by Philip II is bearing down on England's shores. Its sails spotted off Cornwall just days ago. The council must decide: fortify the coast, rally the navy, or seek a desperate parley with Spain. But Elizabeth's temper, a force as unpredictable as the sea, looms over every word. You've seen her rage reduce men to silence, and today you fear her anger could drown the council's resolve. Elizabeth, at 55, is a queen at the peak of her reign, but under unbearable strain. The Armada's approach is the culmination of years of tension, Catholic plots, Dutch rebellions, and her execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, the previous year. Her temper, as you've witnessed, is both a weapon and a burden. Historical accounts, like those in the state papers, describe her outbursts as thunderclaps, capable of halting debates or forcing decisions. A 1588 letter from a courtier recalls her berating a messenger for delayed news, her voice shaking the very walls. Yet her temper is also strategic, used to unify a fractious court. Today, with England's survival at stake, you know her mood could sway the council's course toward action or ruin. You shift in your seat, your prayer book resting on the table, a reminder of your role as spiritual advisor. The council's debate has been heated but cautious, each man wary of provoking the queen. Burghley argues for reinforcing Dover's defenses, citing the cost of a full naval campaign. Walsingham, ever the hawk, presses for an immediate strike against the Armada, his spies confirming its size, over 130 ships. Leicester, Elizabeth's old favorite, urges a bold speech to rally the troops, but his voice falters, as if sensing her mood. You've remained silent, your role to offer moral guidance, but the weight of her temper keeps you guarded. You've seen her lash out at counselors for less, once dismissing a lord for questioning her piety. The historical record of 1588 is vivid with the Armada's threat. England's navy, though scrappy, was outnumbered, and Elizabeth's treasury was strained by years of war. The council's decisions were critical, but her temper often dictated their pace. A diary from a courtier notes her screaming at Burghley for suggesting a tax increase, only to approve it hours later. Your own experience confirms this. Last year, she berated you for a sermon she deemed too Catholic, only to praise your loyalty days later. Her temper is a storm you've learned to weather, but today, with the Armada looming, the stakes are higher than ever. Elizabeth enters, her crimson gown a blaze of authority, her face pale beneath its white paint. The council rises, bowing, and you feel the room's air shift. She sits, her fingers tapping a restless rhythm, her eyes scanning each face. "My lords," she says, her voice low but sharp, "Spain's ships are at my door." And you sit here debating like scholars. The rebuke stings, and you see Burghley flinch. What counsel do you offer? Or do you think me fool enough to face Philip alone? Her temper is rising, and you know one wrong word could unleash it fully. You glance at your colleagues, their silence, a shared fear of her wrath. Burghley speaks first, his voice steady. "Your Majesty, we must fortify the coast and ready the navy, but funds are short." Elizabeth's eyes narrow. "Funds," she snaps, her voice rising. "You speak of coin when my kingdom's life is at stake." She rises, pacing, her gown rustling like a warning. "Walsingham, what say your spies? Is Philip's fleet a jest, or do you all mock me with your caution?" Walsingham, unfazed, replies, "The Armada is real, Your Majesty, and we must strike first." Her gaze shifts to you, and your heart skips. "And you, Archbishop, will you pray Spain away, or do you have counsel worth hearing?" Her tone is a blade, and you feel the council's eyes on you. You bow your head, choosing your words with care. "Your Majesty, I counsel faith and action, rally the people, strengthen the fleet, and trust in God's protection." It's a safe answer, but her lips tighten, and you fear it's not enough. Her temper, demands boldness, but also submission. The Armada's shadow looms, and the council's silence feels like a betrayal. Will her rage push you to a decision that saves England, or will it fracture the council at its most desperate hour? You're still in the privy chamber of Hampton Court Palace. 1588, the air thick with the tension of Elizabeth I's rising temper. You, John Whitgift, Archbishop of Canterbury, sit among the privy councillors, your black robes clinging to your skin in the stifling July heat. The Spanish Armada's shadow looms ever closer. Its sails now reported off Plymouth, and the councils debate over how to respond, fortify the coast, mobilize the navy, or attempt a desperate parley has been paralyzed by the fear of Elizabeth's wrath. Her sharp words, "You speak of coin when my kingdom's life is at stake," still echo, her pacing a restless rhythm that sets your nerves on edge. The room, with its oak table and flickering candles, feels like a trap. And you know her temper could either forge a plan or shatter the council's resolve. The councillors: William Cecil, Lord Burghley, Sir Francis Walsingham, and Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, exchange wary glances, their silence a testament to the Queen's power. You've seen her temper in action before. A year ago, she berated you for a sermon she deemed too lenient toward Catholics, her voice shaking the rafters until you knelt for forgiveness. At 55, Elizabeth is a queen under siege, her reign defined by survival against Catholic plots, Spanish threats, and the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. Her temper, as documented in a 1588 courtier's diary, is a fire that burns all who cross her. Yet it's also a tool used to jolt her advisors into action or to mask her own fears. Today, with the Armada at England's doorstep, her anger is both a weapon and a liability. The historical context of 1588 is dire. The Spanish Armada, with over 130 ships and thousands of men, was Philip II's boldest move to crush Protestant England and restore Catholic rule. Elizabeth's navy, led by men like Francis Drake, was scrappy but outnumbered, and her treasury was nearly empty after years of supporting Dutch rebels. The Privy Council's role was to offer unified counsel, but the state papers reveal a fractured group, often silenced by Elizabeth's temper. A 1588 letter from Walsingham notes her sharp displeasure at delays in naval preparations, forcing hurried decisions. You've seen this yourself. Her rage can spark action, but it also sows fear, making counselors hesitant to speak freely. Elizabeth stops pacing, her crimson gown settling as she turns to face the table. "My lords," she says, her voice a low growl, "do you think me so weak that I need your silence to shield me?" Her eyes blaze, and you feel the weight of her stare, as if she's daring you to speak. Burghley clears his throat, his voice cautious. "Your Majesty, we propose sending Drake to harass the Armada at sea, while fortifying Dover and Tilbury. It's a measured plan, but Elizabeth's fingers tap faster, a sign of her impatience. Harass. She snaps. You would nibble at Philip's fleet, like mice at a crust. Her temper flares, and you see Lester flinch, his usual confidence shaken. Walsingham, ever bold, steps forward. Your Majesty, Drake's fireships could scatter the Armada, but we must act now. His tone is firm, but Elizabeth rounds on him, her voice rising. And if your fireships fail, what then? Shall I hand my crown to Philip on a platter? The room falls silent, the counselors frozen. You've heard tales of her rages, how she threw a candlestick at a page for a spilled tray, how she banished a counselor for questioning her judgment. But you've also seen her pragmatism, like when she approved a risky loan after berating Burghley for suggesting it. Her temper, you realize, is a test, pushing her advisors to prove their worth under pressure. You shift in your seat, your prayer book, a small anchor. As Archbishop, your role is to offer spiritual counsel, but the Armada demands practical action. You've remained silent too long, and her earlier jab, will you pray Spain away? Archbishop, stings. You speak, your voice steady, despite the fear in your gut. Your Majesty, I counsel a rally at Tilbury, where your presence could inspire the troops, as your wisdom inspires us now. It's a bold suggestion, tying her charisma to the war effort. But her eyes narrow. Inspire, she says, her tone sharp. You think my presence a mere show, wit gift, while my navy bleeds. Her temper is a blade, and you feel its edge. The council's silence deepening around you. You bow your head, choosing your next words with care. Your Majesty, your strength is England's heart. Let us arm it with ships and men, guided by your will. The flattery is deliberate, but her lips tighten, and you wonder if you've misjudged. Burghley nods slightly, a rare sign of support, but Lester remains silent, his eyes on the Queen. The historical record shows Elizabeth's temper often forced unity. Her rage at a 1588 council meeting pushed through naval funds despite resistance. But today, the council's silence feels like a fracture, each man fearing her wrath more than the Armada itself. Elizabeth sits, her gaze sweeping the table. You offer plans, but I hear fear, she says, her voice softer, but no less dangerous. Give me counsel that saves my realm, or I'll find men who will. The threat hangs heavy, and you feel the council's resolve waver. Her temper has pushed you to the edge, demanding action in the face of crisis. But what will it take to unify the council and turn her rage into the strength England needs to face the Armada? You're standing in the privy chamber of Hampton Court Palace, 1588, the air heavy with the weight of Elizabeth I's ultimatum. Give me counsel that saves my realm, or I'll find men who will. You, John Whitgift, Archbishop of Canterbury, feel the sting of her words, her temper a fire that threatens to consume the Privy Council's faltering resolve. The Spanish Armada is closing in, its ships now menacing England's southern coast, and the Council's debate, fortify, fight, or parley, has been stifled by fear of her wrath. The oak table before you is strewn with maps and dispatches, but it's Elizabeth's piercing gaze that holds the room captive. Her crimson gown, a vivid contrast to the pale faces of her advisors. William Cecil, Lord Burghley, Sir Francis Walsingham, and Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester. The heat of July presses through the open windows, carrying the faint scent of the Thames, but it's the heat of Elizabeth's temper that makes you sweat beneath your archbishop's robes. At 55, she is a queen forged by decades of danger plots, rebellions, and the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, and her temper is both her strength and her burden. Historical accounts, like those in the state papers, describe her rages as lightning strikes, capable of galvanizing or paralyzing her court. A 1588 courtier's letter recounts her berating a messenger until he wept, only to rally her advisors hours later with a speech that set their hearts aflame. Today, with the Armada at England's door, her temper demands action, and you know the council's silence could doom you all. The historical record of 1588 is vivid with the Armada's threat. Philip II's fleet, over 130 ships strong, aimed to invade England and restore Catholic rule, a direct challenge to Elizabeth's Protestant reign. Her navy, led by Francis Drake and Charles Howard, was outnumbered, her treasury depleted by years of war. The Privy Council's role was to forge a strategy, but Elizabeth's temper often dictated its course. A 1588 dispatch from Walsingham notes her fury at our delays, which forced the council to approve fireships, a risky tactic that would prove decisive. You've seen her temper spark action before, like when she approved a loan after raging at Burghley's caution. Now, her anger is a crucible, and you must find the courage to speak. Elizabeth leans forward, her voice low but cutting. My lords, you sit like statues while Spain's ships draw near. Do you think my crown will save itself? Her eyes sweep the table, lingering on you, and you feel the weight of her challenge. Your earlier suggestion, a rally at Tilbury to inspire the troops, was met with her scorn, and the council's silence has only deepened her frustration. Burghley speaks, his voice steady but cautious. Your Majesty, Drake's fireships are ready, and Tilbury's defenses are bolstered. Let us strike now and show Philip your strength. His words are practical, but Elizabeth's fingers tap faster, a sign of her unrest. Strike, she says, her voice rising. And if your fireships fail, Burghley, what then? Shall I beg mercy from a Catholic king? Walsingham, undaunted, steps forward. Your Majesty, the Armada is vulnerable in tight formation. Fireships will scatter them, and our navy can strike. His boldness earns a sharp glance, but Elizabeth's temper seems to pause, her eyes narrowing as she considers his words. Leicester, sensing an opening, adds, and let your Majesty address the troops at Tilbury. As the Archbishop suggested, your presence will make England's heart a fortress. You nod, grateful for his support, but Elizabeth's gaze returns to you, her voice sharp. Whitgift, you speak of faith and rallies. Will your prayers sink Philip's ships, or do you offer more than words? The rebuke stings, and you feel the council's eyes on you, their silence a heavy burden. You rise, your heart pounding, but your voice firm. Your Majesty, my prayers are for England's strength, but my counsel is for action. Send the fireships, rally at Tilbury, and let your voice turn fear to fire. It's a bold plea, tying her charisma to the war effort, and you see a flicker in her eyes, anger, perhaps, but also interest. The historical record confirms her ability to turn rage into resolve. In August 1588, Elizabeth's Tilbury speech, I have the heart and stomach of a king, rallied her troops, a moment born of her temper's fire. Your suggestion, though risky, aligns with her need to project strength. Elizabeth stands, her gown rustling, and the room holds its breath. You counsel boldness, my lords, she says, her voice softer but no less commanding. So be it. Send the fire ships, fortify Tilbury, and I will speak to my people. She pauses, her eyes locking on yours. But fail me, and no prayers will save you. The council exhales, a plan forged in the heat of her temper. You bow, relief mingling with fear, knowing her rage has unified you for now. The fire ships would scatter the Armada, and her Tilbury speech would become legend. But in this moment, you feel the weight of her trust, fragile as glass. As you leave the chamber, the council's silence gives way to hurried plans, the weight of the Armada lifting slightly. Elizabeth's temper, a force that could have fractured you, instead forged a path to victory. The historical record shows that her rage, though feared, was a catalyst, pushing England through its darkest hour. Your role, though small, was part of that crucible, your words helping to shape her resolve. Reflecting on this, you see how Elizabeth's temper was a mirror of her era, volatile, human, and vital. It drove men like you to rise above fear, to act when silence was easier. Today, we might call her temper a flaw, but in 1588, it was the fire that saved a nation. What tempests, you wonder, shape our own battles, and what courage do they demand? You're standing in the muddy square of Tilbury, a small Essex village. In August 1588, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and the distant tang of salt from the Thames estuary. You're Joan Thatcher, a baker's widow, your apron stained with flour, your hands rough from years of kneading dough. At 40, your life is one of quiet labor, feeding the village and the soldiers now camped nearby, their tents sprawling across the fields. The Spanish Armada looms off England's coast, its threat whispered in every home. But it's not the enemy fleet that sets your heart racing today. It's the news that Queen Elizabeth herself will visit Tilbury to rally the troops. Her temper, a force as storied as her crown, is the talk of the village, and you fear its shadow might fall on you. The village is abuzz, its narrow lanes filled with soldiers sharpening pikes and women hauling water for the camp. You've been tasked with baking extra loaves for the Queen's retinue, a daunting order given your meager oven and dwindling flour. The local innkeeper, a gossip named Marjorie, swears Elizabeth once berated a cook for a burnt pie until he fled in tears. You've heard other tales, how she threw a slipper at a page, how her rage silenced her mighty counselors. At 55, Elizabeth is a queen of legend, her survival through plots and wars a testament to her strength. But her temper, as villagers whisper, is a storm that spares no one. High or low, the historical record of 1588 paints a nation on edge. The Spanish Armada, Philip II's massive fleet, aimed to invade England and crush its Protestant queen, a crisis that united noble and commoner alike. Elizabeth's visit to Tilbury, where she would deliver her famous speech, was a calculated act to rally her people, but her temper shaped its backdrop. Letters from courtiers, preserved in the state papers, describe her sharp displeasure at delays in camp preparations, her voice like thunder when provisions ran short. For common folk like you, her temper was a distant but fearsome force, a reminder of the gulf between your world and hers. Yet her presence in Tilbury is a rare bridge, and you're caught in its shadow. You knead dough in the dim light of your bakery, your hands trembling as you shape loaves for the Queen's men. The camp's commander, a gruff captain named Holt, has warned that Elizabeth expects perfection, and any failure could draw her wrath. You've seen soldiers flogged for lesser faults, and the thought of her anger directed at you, a mere baker, chills you. Your late husband, Tom, taught you to bake with care, but this order tests your skill. The village is stretched thin, its grain stores low after a poor harvest, and you've had to borrow flour from a neighbor, promising repayment you can't afford. You step outside, wiping sweat from your brow, and see the village transforming. Banners flutter, and children run through the square, excited by the Queen's coming. But the elders mutter, recalling her father, Henry VIII, whose temper cost lives. Elizabeth's rages, though less bloody, are no less feared. A peddler passing through told of her berating a merchant for shortchanging her court, leaving him bankrupt. You wonder if your loaves, baked with borrowed flour, will meet her standards, or if her temper will find you wanting. The historical record confirms the strain on common folk in 1588. The Armada's threat forced villages like Tilbury to supply troops, often at great cost. A 1588 petition from Essex villagers, archived in local records, pleads for relief from taxes to feed soldiers, a burden you feel keenly. Elizabeth's temper, though aimed at nobles, trickled down, her demands for efficiency pressing even the lowliest subjects. Yet her charisma could inspire her. Tilbury's speech would soon rally thousands. A moment born of her fiery spirit, a horn sounds, signaling the Queen's approach. You join the crowd at the village edge, your heart pounding as dust rises from the road. Elizabeth appears, astride a white horse, her armor glinting, her red gold hair catching the sun. The crowd cheers, but you notice her eyes sharp, restless, scanning the camp. Captain Holt approaches you, his face stern. Your loaves, Joan, bring them now. The Queen's men are hungry, and she'll not abide delay. You nod, hurrying to fetch the baskets, but a knot of fear tightens in your chest. The loaves are good, but not perfect, one batch, browned unevenly. The crust's too hard. You present the baskets to a steward, who inspects them with a frown. "These'll do," he mutters, but his tone offers no comfort. You watch as the loaves are carried toward the Queen's tent, your fate now tied to her judgment. The crowd's cheers fade, and you catch a glimpse of Elizabeth dismounting, her voice sharp as she reprimands a soldier for a crooked line. Her temper, you realize, is not just a noble's fear. It reaches even you, a baker in a muddy village. Will your loaves satisfy her, or will her wrath turn your quiet life into a cautionary tale? You're back in the bustling square of Tilbury, August 1588. The late summer sun beating down on your flour-dusted apron as you stand among the villagers, your heart still racing from the weight of your task. You, Joan Thatcher, a baker's widow, have just sent baskets of freshly baked loaves to feed Queen Elizabeth First's retinue, camped here to face the Spanish Armada's looming threat. The Queen's arrival has transformed the village, its muddy lanes now crowded with soldiers, banners, and the nervous energy of a people awaiting her legendary speech. But it's her temper, whispered about in every corner, that haunts you. Your loaves baked with borrowed flour, one batch slightly overdone, now sit in her camp, and the thought of her wrath finding you, a humble baker, keeps your hands trembling. The square hums with activity. Women haul water, men sharpen pikes, and children dart through the crowd. Caught up in the spectacle, you catch snippets of talk, soldiers boasting of the queen's courage, elders muttering about her father's brutal rages. Elizabeth, at 55, is a figure of awe, her survival through plots and wars, a testament to her strength. But her temper, as you've heard from travelers and innkeepers, is a force that spares no one. A peddler's tale lingers in your mind, how Elizabeth once berated a cook for a sour broth, dismissing him from court with a single glare. Your loaves, though made with care, are imperfect, and you fear her judgment could ruin you. The historical context of 1588 underscores the stakes. The Spanish Armada, with over 130 ships, was poised to invade, and Elizabeth's visit to Tilbury was a bold move to rally her troops and her people. The state papers record her sharp words to camp officials for delays in supplies, her temper pushing them to action. For common folk like you, the Armada's threat meant heavy burdens. Villages were taxed to feed soldiers, their stores depleted by poor harvests. A 1588 Essex petition, preserved in local archives, pleads for relief from such demands, a cry you feel in your own empty pantry. Elizabeth's temper, though aimed at nobles, rippled down, pressing even bakers to meet impossible standards. You linger near the camp's edge, watching as soldiers carry your baskets toward the Queen's tent. Captain Holt, the camp's commander, strides past, his face grim, the Queen's in a foul mood. "Joan," he mutters, "your loaves better please her, or we'll all feel her sting." His words chill you, and you recall Marjorie, the innkeeper's story of a butcher who supplied tough meat to the court and lost his trade after Elizabeth's rebuke. Your bakery is your livelihood, your only means to feed your 2 children since your husband's death. The thought of losing it to a royal tantrum is unbearable. You glance at the Queen, now addressing her generals near the camp's center, her voice carrying over the crowd. She's resplendent in armor, her red gold hair glinting, but her gestures are sharp, her tone clipped as she chides a soldier for a misaligned pike. The crowd watches in awe, but you see the tension in her posture, the weight of a kingdom on her shoulders. Her temper, you realize, is not just about anger, it's about survival, a fire forged by years of betrayal and war. You've heard how she berated her council for hesitating against the Armada, pushing them to deploy fire ships. But for you, a commoner, her rage is a distant storm that could still drown your small world. A steward approaches, his face stern. "Thatcher, the Queen's men have your loaves. They're sufficient, but one batch is hard as stone." Your stomach drops. Sufficient is no praise, and you know Elizabeth's standards are merciless. You stammer, "I did my best, sir, with what flour I had." He shakes his head. Best pray she's in a forgiving mood. He leaves, and you stand frozen. The crowd's cheers for the Queen, a dull roar in your ears. You think of your children, waiting at home, and the debt you owe for the borrowed flour. If Elizabeth's temper turns on you, your bakery could be shunned, your family left destitute. You edge closer to the camp, drawn by the Queen's voice, now rising as she begins her speech to the troops. "I have come amongst you, as you see, resolved to live or die with you," she declares, her words fierce yet stirring. The soldiers cheer, their fear turning to fire, but you can't shake your dread. The historical record confirms her power, her Tilbury speech, as later transcribed, rallied a nation, her temper's edge honed into inspiration. Yet you've seen its other side, in tales of servants dismissed, merchants ruined, your loaves, a small offering in this grand moment, are now a test of her mercy. As the speech continues, a soldier passes, muttering about the queen's displeasure with the camp's food. She called the bread unfit for dogs, he says, and your heart sinks. You clutch your apron, praying it wasn't your loaves he meant. The crowd presses forward, eager for Elizabeth's words, but you hang back, your fate tied to her temper's whim. Will her rage over your imperfect bread destroy your livelihood, or will her focus on the Armada spare a humble baker from her wrath? You're standing at the edge of Tilbury's muddy fields, August 1588, the late summer sun dipping low, casting long shadows over the sprawling camp where Queen Elizabeth I addresses her troops. You, Joan Thatcher, a baker's widow, clutch your worn apron, your heart heavy with dread. Your loaves, baked with borrowed flour for the Queen's retinue, were deemed sufficient but flawed one batch too hard, a potential spark for Elizabeth's infamous temper. The Spanish Armada looms off England's coast, and while the village hums with the fervor of her visit, you fear her wrath could fall on you, a humble baker, and ruin your livelihood. The crowd's cheers for her speech. I have the heart and stomach of a king ring in your ears, but your mind is fixed on the steward's warning. Best pray she's in a forgiving mood. The camp is a sea of soldiers, their pikes glinting, their faces lit with awe as Elizabeth, astride a white horse, rallies them against the Armada. At 55, she is a vision of defiance, her armor gleaming, her voice carrying over the fields. You've heard the tales of her temper, how she berated a cook until he fled, how she banished a merchant for short measure. But today, her fire is turned outward, toward Spain's threat. Yet you know her rage can strike anywhere, and your imperfect loaves, now in her camp, feel like a betrayal. Your bakery, your children's future, hangs on her judgment, and the weight of it presses against your chest. The historical record of 1588 captures the moment's gravity. Elizabeth's Tilbury speech, preserved in transcripts, was a masterstroke, uniting a fractured nation against the Armada's 130 ships. The state papers note her temper's role in the crisis. Her sharp displeasure at supply shortages pushed commanders to action, ensuring the camp's readiness. For common folk like you, the Armada meant sacrifice. Villages like Tilbury drained their stores to feed soldiers, as documented in a 1588 Essex petition pleading for tax relief. Elizabeth's temper, though aimed at nobles, rippled through the ranks, demanding perfection from all. Yet her charisma could inspire, turning fear into resolve. As her speech would prove, you watch as Elizabeth gestures to the troops, her words fierce. Let tyrants fear. The soldiers roar, their voices shaking the ground. But you remain at the crowd's edge, your eyes on the Queen's tent, where your loaves were taken. Captain Holt, the camp's commander, approaches, his face less stern than before. Thatcher, he says, his voice low, the Queen's men ate your bread. It wasn't praised, but it filled bellies. You're spared for now. Relief floods you, but it's tempered by fear. Spared is no guarantee. And you've heard how Elizabeth's temper can flare over trifles: a burnt dish, a late delivery, your bakery, your only means to feed your children, still hangs in the balance. You glance at the Queen, now dismounting, her generals clustering around her. Her temper, you realize, is not just a noble's fear, it's a force that shapes even your small world. You recall a story from a peddler, how Elizabeth once forgave a seamstress for a torn gown, charmed by her honest apology. Could your honest labor, though imperfect, earn her mercy? You've stretched your meager resources to meet the camp's demands, borrowing flour and working through the night. The crowd presses closer, drawn by her presence, but you hang back, watching a steward emerge from her tent. He beckons you forward, and your stomach twists. The Queen wishes a word. He says, his tone unreadable. You approach, your steps heavy, the crowd parting as you near her tent. Elizabeth stands outside, her armor exchanged for a velvet gown, her red gold hair catching the fading light. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, fix on you, and you curtsy, your knees trembling. Joan Thatcher, she says, her voice firm but not unkind. Your bread fed my men, but it was hard as their resolve. The words sting, and you brace for her wrath, but her lips twitch, almost a smile. Yet you gave what you had. In my realm's hour of need, you stammer, your majesty. I did my best with what little I had. She nods, her gaze softening. Little can be enough. If given true, the moment passes, and she turns to her generals, dismissing you without another word. You back away, your heart pounding with relief. Her temper, so feared, has spared you, her focus on the Armada outweighing your small fault. The historical record confirms this pattern. Her rage often gave way to pragmatism, as when she pardoned a quartermaster for short rations after he proved his loyalty. Your loaves, though imperfect, fed her men, and her mercy has preserved your bakery, your children's future. As you return to the village, the crowd's cheers fade, and you feel the weight of survival. Elizabeth's temper, a fire that could have consumed you, instead became the spark of her Tilbury triumph. Rallying a nation to defeat the Armada, your small role baking bread in a time of crisis mirrors the resilience of countless common folk, whose quiet labors underpinned her victory. Reflecting on this, you see her temper as a force of her era, demanding sacrifice but forging unity. It saved England, not just through nobles' plans, but through villagers like you, who gave all despite fear. Today, we might view her temper as harsh, but in 1588, it was the flame that lit a nation's heart. What small acts, you wonder, still shape our world, unnoticed but enduring? You're drifting now, the echoes of Elizabethan England fading like a dream, the clatter of quills, the rustle of royal gowns, and the distant roar of the Armada's defeat softening into a quiet hum. The stories you've heard of scribes trembling under Elizabeth's sharp gaze, courtiers navigating her fiery outbursts, ambassadors treading carefully, and villagers offering their humble loaves paint a world where her temper was more than a queen's mood. It was a force, a tide that shaped a nation, pushing those around her to rise, to endure, to survive. Her rage, born of a life shadowed by betrayal and danger, was both a burden and a spark, forging resilience in nobles and common folk alike. Picture the Thames at dusk, its waters calm, reflecting the last light of a long day. Elizabeth's temper, so fierce in the heat of crisis, was like that river wild at times, but guiding England through its storms. From the Privy Council's tense debates to Tilbury's muddy fields, her anger demanded loyalty, sacrifice, and action, weaving the threads of a golden age. You, lying there, can feel the weight of history settle, its lessons lingering like a soft whisper. Even the smallest lives, touched by great tempers, leave marks on time. So rest now. Let the candles dim, the palace walls fade. Elizabeth's fire, her strength, her flaws, they're part of you, part of us, carried forward in the quiet resilience of those who came before. Sleep gently, wrapped in the warmth of their stories, and dream of a world where tempers shaped empires